The officer says it with his hat under his arm and his voice kept level, which is the way the Army delivers things it would prefer not to deliver. It is September 1965. The VFW post on Oak Street in Abilene, Texas. The officer has a folder. The flag that should have gone to Walter Alderman at his son's graveside 2 months ago is still in it. A regulation has been cited. Walter Alderman sits across the table and does not move. 26 men in that room have gone quiet. In the chair nearest the window, a man in a canvas work shirt and a battered Stetson is watching the folder. Here is the story. The VFW post on Oak Street had the smell that those rooms always have, coffee that has been sitting too long in old wood, and the particular stillness of a place where men come to be around other men who know what they know. Photographs of the dead ran along the wall above the windows, the same wall they had run along since 1947. The room held 32 folding chairs. Most of them were filled. Walter Alderman had farmed cotton outside Abilene for 31 years. The same 280 acres his father had broken from hardpan in 1921 with a mule team and a second-hand plow. The same acreage Walter had taken over in 1947 when his father's heart gave out at the kitchen table at 63. He had run it alone from that point. The 2 good years and the bad ones. The years when the price held and the years when it didn't. The boll weevil summer of 1952 that took 40% of the crop and left him carrying a note at the bank in town that took 4 years to clear. He had a wife, Ruth, who had died of pneumonia in the winter of 1958, and after that, he had Dennis. Dennis Alderman was 22 years old when he was drafted in February 1964. He had been working the farm beside his father since he was 14, not because Walter had made him, but because the boy had a feel for the land that his father recognized and did not discourage. He could read weather. He could read soil. He knew when a field was ready and when it wasn't. And that kind of knowledge doesn't come from a book and doesn't come quickly. He shipped for Vietnam in August 1964. He was assigned to the 1st Cavalry Division, Airmobile, out of Fort Benning. He was in country for 9 months. He was killed in an engagement in Binh Dinh Province on June 14, 1965. The Army notification arrived at the farm outside Abilene 6 days later. Walter Alderman read it at the kitchen table and then sat there for a long time before he did anything else. The funeral was held at First Methodist on July 1st. The burial was at the municipal cemetery on the east side of town. A detail from Fort Hood attended. There was to be a flag. The flag did not come. What came instead, 2 weeks after the burial, was a letter from the Department of the Army. The letter was written carefully and was not unkind. It explained that a review of Corporal Alderman's service records had identified a period of unauthorized absence from his initial training assignment in 1963, 11 days, in which Dennis, between his induction and his completion of basic training, had returned to the farm without leave to help his father after a machinery accident that had left Walter unable to work. He had returned to Fort Benning of his own accord 11 days later and completed his training without further incident, and the matter had been noted and closed at the time with a reprimand and no further action. The letter explained that under the applicable regulations, this record created a complication for the standard burial honors presentation. The matter was under review. The Army regretted the delay. Walter Alderman had driven into Abilene with the letter in his coat pocket and asked at the VFW post what he was supposed to do with it. The post commander, a man named Herb Dalloway, who had been with the 3rd Infantry in Italy in 1944, had made calls. He had spoken to a sergeant at Fort Hood and a clerk at the Regional Army office in Dallas, and a man at the Department of the Army's Personnel Division in Washington who had been courteous and clear, The matter was a regulatory question. The review process had timelines, and there was nothing to be done from the outside to accelerate it. Dalloway had called a meeting at the post for the second Thursday in September. 12 men came. Then the word moved through the county the way word moves in a place where people have known each other a long time, and by the following Thursday 26 men were in the room when the Army officer arrived with his folder and his level voice. The officer laid it out plainly. He was sorry. He understood the situation. The record existed. The regulation was not ambiguous. The review process would proceed as it would proceed, and he could not offer a timeline, and he could not offer more than that. Walter Alderman does not look at the folder. He looks at the table in front of him, at the grain of the wood, the way a man looks at a surface when he is making sure he stays where he is. He had watched his son bury his mother in 1958. He had watched Dennis work that farm for 8 years without complaint and without anyone asking him to. He had stood at that boy's grave on July 1st with nothing in his hands. The officer has finished speaking. The room has not moved. If you've ever watched a system tell a good man that the rules are the rules and there is nothing to be done, drop your state in the comments. I want to know how far this one reaches. The man by the window had not moved through any of it. He had his hat on his knee and his hands were folded over the brim, and he was watching the officer in the way a man watches something he is deciding what to do about. Not with anger, but with the kind of attention that means a decision is coming. He stood up. He was large in the way that makes a room adjust around a man, not threatening, just present in a way that the space registers. He walked across the floor of the VFW post the way he moved across every room he had ever been in, like he was not in any particular hurry and was not going to be rushed into one. He stopped near the table where the officer was standing. He said, quietly, that boy left without leave to work his father's farm after an accident. Then he went back and finished. Is that right? The officer said that was essentially correct. The man said, then he went to Vietnam. The officer said that was correct. The man looked at the folder on the table. A long moment. Something moved in his jaw. Not anger. The thing that sits just behind anger and is steadier than it. He said, I need a name. Someone in Washington who can receive a letter. The officer looked at him. Then recognition moved across his face. A slow thing, not dramatic. The way recognition happens when a man takes a moment to place what he is looking at, because the context is wrong. He gave the name. Department of the Army, Office of the Deputy Chief of Staff for Personnel. A colonel. The man picked up his hat. He put it on. He looked at Walter Alderman. He said, 11 days. To go home to his father. He said it once plainly, the way a verdict is read. That flag belongs to you. Then he walked to the door and out of it. The room stayed quiet for a moment. Then Herb Dalloway said the name. He said it low, to no one in particular, the way a man says something out loud to confirm that he heard it right. Walter Alderman did not say anything. He looked at the door for a long time after it had closed. The letter arrived at the Office of the Deputy Chief of Staff for Personnel in Washington on September 22, 1965. 1 page. It was addressed to the colonel by name. It said that the writer had been present at a VFW post in Abilene, Texas on September 16th, and had heard the circumstances of Corporal Dennis Alderman's case set forth. That Dennis Alderman had left his training post for 11 days to work his father's farm after an accident, and had returned of his own accord and completed his training, and served 9 months in Vietnam, and been killed in Binh Dinh province on June 14th. That the record of unauthorized absence had been noted and closed at the time without further action, that a flag had been withheld from his father on the basis of this closed record, and that the writer found this outcome inconsistent with what the flag was supposed to mean. It said, "A man who went back deserves to be treated as a man who went back." It was signed with a name. The colonel read it the same day it arrived. He made 2 calls before noon. By the end of the week, the review that had no timeline had a timeline. By October 3, 1965, the determination had been made. The record did not constitute grounds for denial of burial honors. On October 9, 1965, a detail from Fort Hood drove out to the farm outside Abilene. A sergeant folded the flag in the front room of the farmhouse, 13 folds, and presented it to Walter Alderman with both hands. Walter took it. He held it in his lap for a while. He did not say much. The sergeant did not require him to. Walter Alderman farmed that 280 acres for 11 more years, until 1976, when his knees made the work impossible and he leased the fields to a neighbor and moved into a smaller house in town. He kept the farm. He did not sell it. His daughter-in-law, Dennis's widow, Carol, had a son in November 1965, 4 months after Dennis was killed. She named him Dennis Walter Alderman. She raised him in Abilene, 2 miles from the farm, and Walter saw the boy most weeks for the next 20 years. Dennis Walter Alderman enlisted in the United States Army in the fall of 1983 at the age of 18. He served with the 82nd Airborne Division. He was stationed in Germany and then at Fort Bragg, and he completed his enlistment in 1987 and came home to Abilene and went to work in construction management. He visited his grandfather every Sunday until Walter died in 1991. Walter was 81. He had kept the farm for 67 years between his father and himself. The cedar chest in the bedroom of the farmhouse held the flag. Carol had it. She had kept it on the farm after Walter died because it seemed like the right place for it to be. Dennis Walter visited the farm sometimes, just to walk the fields. He said it was the only place that felt like the right size. He has the cedar chest now. It is in the front room of his house in Abilene. The flag is inside, still folded, the way it came out of the sergeant's hands on October 9th, 1965. In the morning, when the light comes through the east window before 8 o'clock, it moves across the cedar chest and touches the brass clasp, and then passes on. John Wayne never told anyone he wrote that letter. Not to his director, not to a co-star, not to a reporter. Not in any account anyone has ever found. If the colonel in Washington knew whose name was on the envelope, there is no record of him saying so to anyone outside that office. What exists is a determination, dated October 3, 1965, reversing an earlier finding. A detail from Fort Hood driving out to a farm. A flag in a man's lap. He had spent 20 years playing men who fought wars he never fought. He knew the distance between the screen and the thing itself. He did not close that distance by talking about it. He noticed a man who had been told, politely, that the rules were the rules. He wrote down what he had seen and signed his name to it and mailed it and never mentioned it again. Some debts don't have a number. They have a name on an envelope, and a flag in a cedar chest, and morning light that keeps moving whether anyone is watching or not. If this story reached you, share it with someone who'd know why it matters. Subscribe if you haven't. There are more of these, and every one of them deserves to be told. And unfortunately, they don't make men like John Wayne anymore.